Catherine, we should get things started. Okay. And I have gavel set. Okay, so first order of business is if we've had a chance to, anybody have any comments about the minutes?
No.
They look fine to me.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, so motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to find out, is Chris Herman with us? Chris? No, he may or may not join us. Let's see. I'll mention what he wrote in about. So let's do the water level rainfall.
Okay. And if you could put those up now, hopefully they'll be visible. We don't have the full scope of wells, so we have 5 wells, 2 of which are of the big 4. And I made these two charts, and what the chart is showing is that we've had the steady decay down with.
What is our time frame there?
Can you share the screen so we can see this chart?
And this steady downflow from the rain from the middle of the rain.
It's coming. It's
interesting, and well, this will be again that the steady decline that went until around the middle of July, and then there's just a little bump up, and at the same slope it continues to go down until the rain that we had last week, and it's kind of again it's a visible bump. Which took a couple days to get to the water level.
But you're looking at that in the real time.
Yes, this is real-time stuff. That's exactly correct. Because these 5 wells are real-time.
That's why we have this.
The rest of the wells haven't been posted yet.
Okay.
Similar thing happened. There is a gap in Menantic, in Manwaring, I should say. And Manwaring took a reaction, a strong reaction after the August rain. And of course, we don't see it here. But the same impact happened, is that the trend was coming down. We had some rain, it got higher, and then it went right back down to its continual downslope. So, this Hay Beach, or I should say Goat Hill, may come up a little bit more. It's got, I think, something like 40 feet or so of soil to get through. So, as far as the well readings go, which is the table, what we basically have is that the shallow wells are looking great. I got Rocky Point, I got Brander. They bumped up from the rain. That's really nice.
I saw on some of the real-time readings, they bumped up very quickly.
Right. Goat Hill is still lower than you'd expect, but it may just be taking a little bit longer for the water to get down there. And Manwaring as well is below the median. Not tremendously bad, like 0.4, what is that, 3 or 4 inches at 0.4 feet. And this is about 0.6 feet.
Right.
So the Goat Hill number is great, not great, but again, it's at 14%. Although there's a big grouping of wells from history. And there's only 3 wells actually that are lower than for Goat Hill in our history. But again, these numbers are all reasonably close, and knock on wood or mylar or whatever the hell it is, that we'll see some more effect of the rain. Right. And also that we'll get more rain.
Well, yeah, we hope for it not to stop, but also you circulated in the previous week the NOAA.
Right, that's exactly right. We for the first time in 13 months, we're not in any of the drought categories. We have been, for a period of time, we were in the abnormally dry. Last year or over the past year, we have been in a moderate drought periodically, but now we're not in any of the drought categories. Right. So
we're not in guarded anymore.
I would say that would be, we got a glitch in that. We could leave it as at ground, given that.
Always be guarded, I believe.
Yeah, but I think that we can.
We should look, if we have any concern about the well level categories, look, Doug's group has, Silver Beach has, and Ken's has set up a lovely sign. It's based right off of our, what we're doing. And so if we need to, in any way, calibrate those levels, let's bring it up in a meeting, especially when we have full data. I just want to point out that even though we're out of abnormally dry, we're out of a specific drought, it's kind of obvious to me, and Fresh Pond, I always have to put on my Fresh Pond hat for a second. I walk down to Fresh Pond, there's a rock, it's just easy, just like I can go outside and tell you if it's raining. Similarly, I can go outside, I can tell you, we don't have like a super large, we're not up high.
No, that's for sure.
We are below what I, in my life experience, expect to see when I step out at this season, even when we've had some drought coming back. The other thing that I personally just feel needs to be said here is that the issue isn't how much rain we get, but timing of rains. And what we're seeing at this point is a break in a pattern of consistently recharging earlier in spring. And then going to a drought season here in August. And now what we're seeing is things have been pushed down. We had a longish drought period, and then we've been having very heavy, often short rains. So we're moving more toward the two extremes.
Okay, and then Ken has the precipitation information.
These are the numbers I've been tracking, in Silver Beach, in essence, with a manual device that I have that John Hallman gave me years ago to measure rainfall. In August, as of the 19th, we had 4.93 inches, which is the most we've had for about 5 years in August. It was really a tremendous outpour, if you recall, that we had during that period. So our year-to-date numbers are 26.78 inches. A normal year for us overall is over 42, between 42, 40, 45. It varies depending on who's keeping track of the numbers. But it's in the mid 40s usually is a full year. The last time we had this much rain was 2018. We had 6.79 inches in August, which gave us a year-to-date, the end of August in 2018 of 32.17. So there's an example of where we are. We're at 26.78 versus back then it was 32.7. So it's still a little bit less than what we'd like to see, but thank goodness we had a good August so far.
All right.
I'd like to add, build a little bit on Peter's comment, which I thought was extremely helpful. It's important that we also realize, I think maybe the public has a misconception that when we look at these well readings, the lower well readings indicate higher usage. But as Peter pointed out, we know that the majority of our groundwater is actually naturally seeping and flowing into our estuaries, and the timing of our rain is becoming increasingly more important. It's not that we're looking at well readings like they are a reservoir, because we are actively losing water each and every day into the estuaries. So usage doesn't necessarily correspond with these lower readings. We may be very restricted in our use, but the levels will continue to decline if we're not getting rain at the right time of year so that they can recharge. And like Peter said also, very, very high well readings and aquifer levels in the spring also correspond with higher seepage and evacuation of the aquifer into the estuary. So the more water that we're storing, we actually are then discharging more water at the same period. So it's an odd relationship that we have to start examining more functionally how we develop policy around this. And Peter, I think, is starting to push that point in a very positive way, that timing of water and how we look at these well readings is very relevant in the context of drought policy, irrigation policy. So all really good, discussion points to continue on.
Yeah, I would also suggest that we might start monitoring our bays more frequently by the DEC in order to see if we can corroborate these well levels with such indicators as salinity or temperature. in places like West Neck Creek, Menantic Creek, Cockles Harbor, Crab Creek, among other places on the island, because these are the destinations for that migration of water out of the aquifer that Joe is referring to.
Mhm. You know, I think that you're leading us to a number of themes that I think are going to come back to us a number of times in this session. PJ, you had mentioned that the findings of bacteriological findings in West Neck Harbor seem to correspond more to rainfall than to the usage by boats that might potentially need to be pumped out, which was an interesting observation. But it raises the concern for me that as we see issues with sea level and with saltwater intrusion issues, we're also seeing issues with contamination with salt water entering septic tanks and flooding septic tanks. So if our septic tanks near shore are getting into trouble, we should be seeing, after rains, bacteriological results. So this coordination of the waterways testing that's going on, what's the name of the blue, yeah, their data, that data, and the data we have access to that data now as well, and we should be coordinating what we're seeing, impact we're seeing at the bay, with rainfall, with nearshore areas that might have vulnerable septic systems.
Every Wednesday you can go on.
Right. So now again, we don't have. Sorry, I actually shouldn't move on. Were there other? I would like to sort of just quickly take on this item number 4. Christopher Herman's not here, but were there other comments on? Oh, Christopher, great. So Christopher, if you could come up and just tell us what you wanted to mention. But before you start, let me just make sure that there wasn't any other comments needed about rainfall and well levels. Great. Okay, so Chris, yeah.
I'll be very quick, and thank you for the time. I was in touch with the chair in his capacity in Fresh Ponds because I was interested to learn what could be done to measure different parameters in Chase Creek, which we live next to Chase Creek. And I was seeing during a recent time, very low tide, some very strange looking things happening in the water column, sort of strange colors of green and so on. It's very shallow there. I'm not a water estuary expert by any means. I hope there might be some testing of some kind that could be organized to.
Could you just mention how long you've lived, how many years you've lived there? Roughly.
Been seasonal. I would say we've had the house now 20 years.
So about 20 years. So in summers, 20 years, you've had a chance to look at the same spot, right?
Yeah, and we've been on the island 60 years now, so I frequently have occasion to see.
So, because our interest is what's changing, or is there a change? You're observing something that you didn't observe in previous years?
I would say there is a change over certainly in the last couple of years. I could be wrong, but my impression is that especially with decreasing tidal flow, things seem to be deteriorating.
Do you know, are you observing that there is decreased tidal flow?
I would.
Because there, I mean, it's likely because things silt up.
Very casual,
Unscientific.
data-supported basis, yes. I would say there's siltation going on less.
Like under the bridge and.
Water in and out. I have no idea what's happening in terms of input from septic tanks or so on and so forth, but I do seem to, I am aware of this changes in the water column that just
Right, it's looking.
are odd colors, yeah.
Yeah, you were writing the creek is brackish. Well, no, you were writing the water depth is low. The water has turned visibly turgid and rather sick looking yellowish green.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so the question, so what Chris is asking us for is how can we look at this? How can we test? How can we kind of get a handle on what we're looking at? And I had written back saying, this is actually what this is the right place. Now, the first thing is that as you'll see, much of what gets done is because citizens like you start to get up and say okay, what can be done? How can we look at this? Let's call somebody in to do some testing. And my concerns, so I was certainly alert to the tidal flushing issue, which will come up with Menantic Creek again. But that issue that I had mentioned just a moment before about septic tanks potentially having water rising and entering them and then causing bacteriological contamination. We have beach testing that's done on a regular basis that picks up precisely that kind of bacteriological contamination. Could we get a check to see if there's bacteriological contamination happening back in Chase Creek? It would be important to identify if we have septic systems failing because they're underwater on Bridge Street.
Right.
Peter, we could ask the DEC to go in and sample the water there. And when they do that sampling, they do coliform levels, salinity, temperature, and sometimes dissolved oxygen levels. And that would immediately give us some feedback. We just had them test both West Neck Harbor and Crab Creek with some interesting results, which, to your point, didn't really indicate a great deal of coliform contamination.
Right. No, we may not. It'll be great if we see that there's no coliform bacteriological contamination, and now we're looking at the harmful algal bloom possibilities, and which certainly are something. But we have to kind of have a handle on what's our system doing here. So yeah, Meg, did you?
I was just going to say, you're not typically going to get bacteria coming from your septic system through all the soil into the water. You'll get that if there's a flooding event and sewage rises to the surface and runs off. Mm-hmm. But you're not necessarily going to get it through, because the bacteria will get trapped in the soil. It'll filter. Mm-hmm. So, the only time you'll really end up with sewage in the water is if there's a major flooding event, the sewage comes to the top of the surface because the system collapses and then washes in. But it's not necessarily going to flush that way. You know what I mean? You're not going to get as significant of an event.
All right. I wonder if you're saying that it's excess to dot our I's and cross our T's in the coliform bacteriological
No, because
direction.
you can have the coliform from other sources. Mm-hmm. It doesn't necessarily have to be septic waste. It could be that
Animal
you have
waste.
a ton of geese in that area, or it could be any number of things, and it could be any number of runoff events, or you could find something bizarre that you weren't even anticipating. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense to test it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's testing, and then obviously your interest would be in things should get better, right?
Well, what's it? I want to make sure there's a problem,
Right.
but yes, then we would have.
Right. So down the line, we would think about is there a reduction in flow there? So is tidal flushing part of the solution? Are there sources, bacteriological sources that we can identify? So yeah, I will.
When was there ever dredging? Does anybody recall any kind of dredging that ever happened in there?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
It's always been just.
The comp plan also does talk about stepping up our dredging for non-navigable reasons. For other reasons.
It has filled in there, as I see it at the bridge.
Yeah, it has to. Same with Gardner's Creek, it has to.
Yeah, I would, argue this thematically, that tidal flushing is an important part of our island's breathing.
Mm. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Chris, thank you. We'll keep on with this. Okay, I'd like to leave a lot of our time for this next presentation, the Menantic Creek well, first, I think we don't have Stephen with us, but just there's a structural thing going on here that I'm not sure that the entire committee is aware of. The Menantic Creek Keepers have begun their science testing program with the understanding that they're going to be working under our aegis. and reporting back to us. And Joe and I will be liaisons to the Menantic Creek Keepers. It's now the Menantic Creek Keepers Conservancy, Inc., because we're now working with a grown-up 501c3 organization.
Well, we're not close.
You guys
We're
approved.
not that yet, we're filed for that.
You're filed.
We're almost incorporated.
Okay, on your way.
On our way.
All right, and so they have been doing their work. They have put in 2 testing units, I think about, they'll tell us, but around $3,000 a piece at their own expense. And they're wanting to make sure that they've developed a citizen science protocol, and they want to make sure they're handing off their data on a regular basis to us as well. So with that, do you want to speak first, or do you, David?
I'll
Or?
speak and David will get ready to, he has the data. You want to get ready? You want to come?
We'll be sharing your screens.
Okay. So anyway, yes, we're incorporated, we filed for the 501c3. We gave a similar presentation to the Menantic Peninsula Association a week or 2 ago, although we've updated it with the data from this past Saturday. So we have 2 stations in place. One of them is at the head of the creek at Mike Anglin's dock, and the other one is at what used to be my dad's dock, which is sort of down in Midway. The first one went in at 18B South Midway on June 3rd. The other one has been in, I'm not sure, David, 3-4 weeks?
9 weeks, I believe.
No, the second one, the second one, 3 weeks. Okay, so we have about 3 weeks of data on that. David has been putting it together for us. You know, we get it in a form that's sort of hard for us all to understand. There's lots of ups and downs,
Right.
lots of influences, tides and rainfall and all kinds of things. And so he's going to give us a summary of what we've found to date. I think some of our next steps are to start to talk to Caitlin and other people who can help us understand what it is we're finding.
So Caitlin is Caitlin Cunningham,
Right.
scientist from the United States Geological Survey, who's been advising this project.
Right, so we initially sent us the data, or I did, and said, does this seem right to you? You know, and she said, yeah. And then we have been looking at the South Ferry site, and we see that they have similar fluctuations.
Mhm.
Not the same, but it's reassuring to see that we're in the same neighborhood.
Mhm.
So I'm going to update her now that we have this put together, which David just did like yesterday,
Mhm.
because we just downloaded the last data on Saturday. And are you ready?
Almost.
Okay.
All right.
So we are hoping to get a 3rd station at the neck of the creek, which is where David lives, so that we can see, you know, how those conditions.
At the neck, meaning the highest up?
No, I mean, like just before you enter the creek, at the mouth of the creek.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
In closer, not past the boatyard into the creek, but in the narrows there.
That area.
Yeah.
And in Mike Anglin's dock, how far up is that?
It's at the very end.
Is it all the way up at the head?
Yeah.
Over where we're seeing the flow from the schoolways.
On the left,
Part of it.
Yeah, yeah,
Across further towards the
Okay.
right, yeah. Well, we'll show you, we have a map.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
There we go.
Are we up? Okay.
Okay.
I'll let Dave talk. I'll sit down.
We are the Menantic Creek Keepers Conservatory, Inc. And we are a particular subgroup where we're collecting data and we're going to present our data.
The microphone's up there and there's a bunch of people on Zoom. So if you
You're able
could
to?
take a seat there, then perfect.
He's moving.
Thank you.
You can sit right there.
Yeah.
That feels good.
Okay, so again, we are a subcommittee of the Menantic Creek Keepers Conservatory Incorporated. And our job is, we are citizen scientists. We're collecting the data. Let's see. So that's Menantic Creek.
Yep.
And these are the locations of the 3 data loggers. 2 are in place, 1 is anticipated. So the first one is on 15 South Menantic Road, that's Mike's
And over here is 18B South Midway. That's Alice.
Yep.
And then eventually we'll have one down here. That's me. So that's what a data logger looks like. And this is what it looks like when it's in place. So they're attached to a board, which is then submerged. The board itself is attached to a dock, and then it's submerged midway between low and high tide.
It's always underwater.
It's always underwater. So what are we measuring? Well, we have 3 parameters. We're measuring dissolved oxygen, which, as everyone knows, is important for all aquatic life. We're measuring water temperature, and we're measuring salinity. So we're going to look at the typical values for these 3 parameters. And then at the end of the data presentation, I'll give you some context as to what's going on in waters immediately around us, like the Peconic Bay. So this is an important graphic because it gives you an idea of what dissolved oxygen means to the things that are living in it. So there's a safe zone between 7 to 8 and 3 to 4 milligrams per liter of dissolved oxygen. Below 3 to 4, fish might start to avoid that water, and below 1, everything dies. So that's the safe zone. Now, these are some typical temperatures for our waters, I should say Peconic Bay. You'll notice that in August and July, 71, 72, it's been a bit warmer this year, but those are some typical ones. I don't know what year this is, but you can find that. Typical salinities really ranges. The ocean is about 3.5%. And then Gardiner's Bay, it ranges anywhere from 0.9 in the estuary, which is brackish water, so that makes sense, to 3%. All right, so we have 2 data loggers active in 2 sites, sites 1 and 2. So what are data sets? So each data logger collects data sets. So a data set is a data point which is every 15 to 30 minutes. It collects those 3 parameters. Each data point, as I said, has the 3 parameters of dissolved oxygen, temperature, and salinity. The logger is allowed to run for approximately 1 week, and this produces hundreds of data points for each of the 3 parameters. And then I put them into data sets. Each set represents 1 week of data. At South Midway, we have 9 sets of data so far, and at South Midway, sorry, that's a misprint. That would be South Menantic.
Yeah.
Sorry. So what do we do with the data? So the data gets downloaded onto a computer, and then it's imported and converted to Excel, and then I summarize it. So there are 200 to 300 data points for each of the 3 parameters. So I find averages, but I'm also looking at mins and maxes and variability. So these are the latest data sets, 9 for South Midway and 3 for Menantic. That's correct. So this is what you're about to see here are the data sets averages for dissolved oxygen, temperature, and salinity, and then the overall average down below for all 9 data sets. So those are some important numbers to remember, and I'll come back to it. This next slide shows the average dissolved oxygen over those 9 weeks. And you'll notice that I've highlighted the 4 milligrams per liter with yellow. That's like the caution if you get below that, and below red, below 2 is danger. So we really haven't dipped that far down. Now this next slide shows the variability in dissolved oxygen over those, for one particular data set, just to give you some idea of how the variability that happens in any given day. And so we see that we do dip down into the quote unquote danger zone for some period of time. It's kind of tricky to get the x-axis to reflect the time. Still working on that, but it's approximately 2 to 4 hours. So what does that mean?
David, just let me ask you, when you say 2 to 4 hours, you're saying from crossing the yellow and to returning to the yellow?
Yeah. So what does that mean? Is there some stress that happens to the fauna as a result of this repeated pattern of low oxygen? So that's something marine biologists might be able to better answer.
What time of day? What time of day?
Yes, the times of day are down there. So there is, right, I know, it's hard to read. So we're looking at that pattern,
In the evening, or morning?
early morning, late evening. So, and there's another piece to this, and that's tide level.
Yeah,
that's-
what is the relationship to tides?
That's a great question. That's something we're looking at. Generally, it's low tide, we're getting the lower oxygen.
Yeah, low tide at night, you know, or at- when it's dark.
So the outbound tide will be carrying the fresh water into the creek, and the inbound tide will be carrying the salt water back out. Additionally, at nighttime, photosynthesis won't be happening in the water. There's not too much fresh water that's coming in.
We don't know how much, it's definitely some, but we don't know.
Peter,
Well, we have
that's not true.
fresh ponds.
Not fresh water coming in?
No, photosynthesis occurs at night too.
Oh, it's also occurring at night, okay, thank you.
But not as much.
But it's definitely, you can see it follows the early hours of the
Yeah.
night between 2 and
Yeah,
4.
well, what I haven't done is matched it up with the tides yet, so that's something to look at. I think the tendency, so far, what I've looked at, what we've looked at, it looks like low tides are where we're getting those lows. But they're transitory, that's not our average, right? So if you're a fish and you're in that zone for that time, you're just gonna move to where it's better. I don't know what it means long-term, but anyway. This is the average water temperature over those 9 data sets for South Midway, and this is the variability. We had a high of 84 degrees. This is the salinity for South Midway, and this is the variability in salinity, and its salinity's been pretty steady.
Could you go back to that previous slide, please? The salinity. Slide, that one.
Salinity.
One more, yeah.
This has a lag.
Yeah.
And this is just an average of all the data points.
That's correct.
That high temperature, was that taken from the mouth or was that an average?
That's the average for
The
site
head,
2.
I should say. That was at the very head.
Yeah, head. This is the second data set from Monantic for 3 weeks of data. Overall averages and the weekly averages. And so that's what it looks like, the averages over the 3 data sets for the dissolved oxygen, and the variability is the next slide. And interesting that the dips aren't as many or as long. Now, the x-axis did not come out right, so I cannot find the right times.
And this is well numbered, this is test site 2, right?
This is actually test site 1.
So this is higher up.
That's correct.
Correct, but it's also deeper.
And on the east side, it's deeper.
Yeah, it's significantly deeper there at my stock.
By maybe
By feet.
3 feet.
Yeah, exactly. So he's got a lot more depth there, which makes a difference in the temperature and a lot of other things.
So that's where they're gonna go when it's low at site 2, the fish. Average water temperatures. Variability in water temperature is next. Average salinity and variability in salinity. And now, what do the data mean, and some context. So for some context, I went to this website, and I'm not going to go to it right now. I'll just show you some still screenshots that I've taken. Remember those numbers that we had? Well, let's take a look at what's going on here in Shelter Island Sound. This is for the month of July. As you can see, for dissolved oxygen, you're going from a high of 9 to a low of 3, with an average of around 7, which is the same average that we're finding.
Excuse me, where was this data collected? Where
I didn't collect the data. This is from the USGS for Shelter Island
This
Sound.
is South Berry site.
That's right, Southbury.
South Berry site.
Okay.
This is their new monitoring station. Keep in mind that these 2 locations relate to each other.
Sophisticated equipment.
Right, the water is a heck of a lot deeper at this ferry.
Yes,
Oh, it's a lot more movement of water there.
Mhm.
yes.
Yes, I just thought I would provide this as context or comparison so we can compare the data that we're getting with the data.
Is there another site on Shelter Island other than the South Ferry? And Monantic?
I don't believe so.
Oh, another USGS.
Yeah.
Not out of the
I don't
USGS.
believe yes.
Okay, but the Peconic estuary program up and down the Peconic has a number of these stations. Yeah.
Next slide shows water temperature,
Yeah.
the variability in water temperature over the month of July. And the next slide shows salinity with some dips there, but it's not a very dramatic dip. You're going from 4.5 to 4.1%, but the average salinity is about 4.5%. That gives you some context. So again, going back to what the numbers you just saw from the USGS for Shelter Island Sound, South Ferry, they're not that different from the numbers that we're getting, with an average of around 7 for dissolved oxygen. Our average temperature around 78 or 79, depending on the site, and the average salinity. So what's next for us? We're going to continue the data collection at these two sites until November. We're considering a third data logger at site number 3, and then we're thinking about collecting data for other parameters, such as nitrate, phosphorus, and the bacteria that you were talking about. Looking at sources of funding, and we are developing a website, and all of this data will be available on that website.
Okay. That's great.
All right.
Very much.
Well done.
So that's great. So we now have a 9-week and a 3-week period. Do you have visual observations of how the creek has been doing during that time?
Well, we started with the Secchi disk. We're not keeping consistent data with that. It's something that
I mean, it has been
could
very,
be part of.
visibility in the creek is very minimal.
Mhm.
Yes, and we did notice that the lowest dissolved oxygen and the highest temperature were during that period of time in July, where you can see our average was 5.89 for dissolved oxygen. With that, we had some very lows for some of those low tide periods. So it's kind of a question of like, and that's where we want to, I think, talk with Caitlin and perhaps other people about what that all means. Like, how long does it have to be that low for it to be really harmful?
Also, you only have a very short, you have
Exactly, this is
very
the
little data
beginning.
at this moment, right?
Yeah, it's only like now that we've seen, okay, it got cooler and things went up a bit and it got a little better and we had some rainfall. I mean, the rainfall makes a big difference too in the dissolved oxygen.
Now, did you guys see any of the rust tide that occurred?
I have not seen rust tide in Menantic. We did have that thing, you know, where the muck comes up,
Uh-huh.
the floaty muck comes up. We did have that, which usually happens when it's very hot or has happened the past couple of years. I mean, that was what got me to call you guys a couple of years ago to be like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
So, you know, we've had that again.
Good to know what that is.
I have a question, Alice, about in your presentation, it said Logger is only in for a week.
Well, we download the data every week.
Okay.
On Saturday afternoon. We clean it of any fouling, reset it, and reinstall, relaunch
Okay,
it.
so
it's been going constantly with just a download every week.
Right, I take it out for 2 hours approximately.
Yeah.
Clean it, collect the data from it,
Yeah,
and then put it back.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're looking at perhaps extending it now. We've had a lot less fouling as we're getting into this time of the year. Early in the season, we had like fish eggs on everything and all kinds of stuff. But so we're gonna see as we get into the fall, maybe letting it go 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because we can still break the data into 1 week increments and analyze it in the same fashion. But it's quite cumbersome to schedule our lives around it every Saturday at 1 o'clock to download data.
And clean.
Which is what I've been doing, so, or we've all been doing.
The question,
Yes.
is there any crabgrass or eelgrass at all?
Not that I'm aware of, not that I'm aware of. In fact, there's very little vegetation.
At all, it's all muck in the
It's
bottom.
all muck.
And speaking of that came to my mind. You were speaking, David, about fish will swim away if it's low oxygen. But plant life isn't going to be supported also, I would think.
Well, plant life is different. Yes, that's true. They need more sustained, low dissolved oxygen before they die. So we're talking about 2 or 1 milligrams per liter for an extended period of time.
Kill plants. Yeah,
Would kill plants.
yeah. But I guess the question might be like, well, if it keeps happening,
Right.
like they keep kind of getting kicked back a little, I don't know.
Well, that's the question.
That's
yeah,
the
we must
question.
ask.
And the reason why we need a longer term.
Right, right.
Yeah, that creek
Not
has
a
been filling
conducive
in for
environment
years,
for
basically.
shellfish.
Well, hold on, let Joe Joe, go ahead.
Sorry,
Those repeated low DO levels are not a conducive environment for shellfish survival, particularly at that time of the year and temperature. So certainly we wouldn't expect to see a thriving, oyster, clam, and/or scallop population under those conditions.
Which means we're also losing filter feeders.
Yeah.
You're basically describing the loss of filter feeders, right?
Yeah, which are help keeping, the water quality in check. And it seems like, that spike in the DO certainly relates to a lack of balanced algae. So I suspect that drain in the DO when the tide stops flowing is likely related to too much organic decay in the area and not being balanced by a healthy shellfish and eelgrass population. So you're relying on the flushing to essentially take out everything that's biodegrading all at once at low tide. And then, eventually that additional silting will constrain the ability of the waterway to flush, and all of these issues begin to pile up on each other.
Did we mentioned about having the drone take pictures of the health of the bays. Is that something that is going to happen? Can it happen?
It did happen already, Lisa. The photography was somewhat helpful, but it was difficult it's difficult to capture these precise blooms when there's any sort of disturbance to the water surface. So even under a light wind condition, it's hard to capture the contrast in the watercolor by drone, we found. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, when you had emailed about discoloration and brown tide, I went down to the strait between the harbor and West Neck Bay, and it was definitively brown.
Yeah, we got some nice aerial pictures, nice promotional material, but it's been difficult to use the photos. Been very difficult to use the photos to qualitatively assess what the conditions are day to day. The things like even the cloud cover have an impact on how the photos come out, and the wind has been the most challenging for good photos. In any case, though, I've been sharing them with the Cornell Cooperative Extension in Southold and trying to get some sort of guidance from them, although it's been too intermittent for us to get any real good feedback from them.
I would also just, having a lot of contact with algal blooms, things change fast. You can't quite, unless you're really ready to act right away, it's hard to capture the moment. And in this particular case, things did change fast. There was simultaneously the red tide in West Neck Creek and down to West Neck Harbor. And also a harmful algal bloom in Fresh Pond. So it was conditions that were conducive to these sorts of events, but things were very changeable over the course of a week or so, and then the weather was changed quite a lot as well, quickly. So I think just being ready, certainly the police drone idea, I think it's still, I think that.
I was just wondering if there was, obviously there are issues.
In this particular case, it didn't really work out for us. And in terms of reliable, I wouldn't say that it's science. It's just getting a picture of what's going on.
Yeah.
And in particular, from my point of view, it's the extent of what's going on that a drone could kind of give us a feeling for. When you're down low to the water, you just don't have that perspective.
Is the DEC was going to dredge, right? Is there any schedule on that?
I have not heard any update. I was in fact going to contact,
The county, right? Not the
they were waiting on the permit from the county. So I haven't heard any update. I was thinking I'd follow up with Waterways Management and see if they've heard anything.
Okay.
Maybe Joe knows.
Yeah, we haven't got the permit yet. It's the county that would do the dredging, and the county is seeking the permits from the Army Corps. So no news on that. However, the dredging would be restricted to the throat of Atlantic.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, the mouth.
And if you do put a sensor there, I wouldn't leave it there while they're dredging, or else you'd say,
No.
hey, where did all the equipment go?
Well,
What are the plans on nitrates testing? Anything like?
well, David's been looking into nitrate testing. I mean, a lot of it is sampling, so it's time sensitive, tide sensitive, rainfall sensitive as to when you do it, and you're gonna get random results. Dr. Gobler's office has started taking some samples from Menantic. They've been there twice, once every 2 weeks. I have not heard any results yet from what they're finding, so I'm actually very interested to
Keeping on
hear
top of their data.
where that comes. But David Hoffman had been in touch with him, and he's now coming, he's now sending someone every 2 weeks to take samples at David's dock.
You're establishing baselines really right now.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It's just beginning of long-term
Right.
observations.
Yes.
Yeah, I just,
Or do you guys know if that's part of PEP, the bacteriological,
I believe,
yeah, we're looking at that.
I believe Gobler's, he said it is part of his wider Peconic Estuary study program,
Okay.
that he's
good to
looking at
know.
that,
Good to
yes,
know, because
yes.
That might be then a candidate for their big eelgrass sort of study restoration
Right.
project that's coming up.
Right,
So
and
that's good.
yeah, and I know they have some funding coming up at the end of this year, going into next year for water quality initiatives, so we're gonna try to look into that now that we're actually an organization. So, yeah, so there's a lot of things we gotta try to figure out as far as funding the next station. We need to re-up some of the pieces of equipment that attach to the ones we have, because each year you have to buy a new head for the dissolved oxygen. And then also other testing that we might be able to do.
There are a lot of properties all the way around this creek. What's your intention of going out to try and get some funding through these folks that basically,
We have already spent over $5,000 that we've collected from those people.
from these people? So it's been pretty good with regards to your neighbors and so forth.
We have over 60 people on our mailing list.
That's good.
We have a board that's gonna meet on Saturday and actually become official. So we're really moving along. We had a lot of good donations. We had a yard sale. So we raised enough money for the first device, bought it, put it in. We had almost enough for the second device, and everyone said, let's just do it, get it in. So we did that. So,
That's really impressive.
yes, and we were really happy when we went to the Menantic Peninsula Association. They donated $350 to us.
Are you going to be tracking also the installation of these advanced systems for septic?
I'd love to.
That would be another
Yes.
thing that would be
Yes.
on the to-do list of my mind is because.
Right, I mean, I know where some of them are, but I don't know.
is that published?
Is that what we say?
Privy to that
Public
information.
information?
Is that public information?
We track
I'm
that,
not
we
sure,
track that
because
as
the
a
building
township.
department should have it, but I'm not sure.
Joe?
Yes, we track that as a township, so there's no need to separately track that.
Okay, so
But can we get access to it?
could we know who around the creek has done it?
We can check. I don't know offhand, but we can.
Okay, I mean, I know people are working on it. I know several people who are working on it. And I know people who've done it, so,
Like fresh pond and stuff.
yeah, we've done it. Yeah, so.
And the rundown, if memory serves, the rundown from the school.
Yeah.
Down
So the
here.
rundown from the school
But
comes
that was
right to that head on the.
Is that a
right.
decade? Is that, was that, I forget what the motion was of the outflow.
So
It's not like the septic system is in at the school and the next day you're pumping.
No,
It's like 30 years, 30 years.
30 years, yeah, so.
So in 30 years, nitrogen flow to the head of Menantic Creek will only be based on 0.19 milligrams of
Yeah.
nitrogen rather than 100.
Right, and that doesn't include all the other septics that are flowing into it.
Right. So, right. However, you do see that there's a channeling effect going on to the head of Menantic Creek. So you might have a choke point there. You might have something to think about there. The other thing to think about, obviously, if Joe is right, and this downward spikes of dissolved oxygen are leading to the loss of shellfish, is there a mitigation purely on the level of dissolved oxygen that could be done? So.
Yeah.
But these are all down the line, it's a down the line process, right? Understand your whole system first.
Did you mention, and it may not be at this site, that you had oysters
I have oysters.
at your house, on Menantic
At my
Creek?
dock, at the same dock where
Same dock as
where the sensor number 2 is.
And do other residents on the.
There are a few other residents around the creek who have oysters as well, yeah.
Much of this was triggered by the failure of.
Right, I remember that
We have a lot of
discussion.
loss at certain times,
Mhm.
and I don't.
Trying to understand it.
Here. But that's just me. Well, me too.
Right.
They're good at Christmas.
Yeah.
Okay, well, obviously, thank you so much. This is the beginning of something. Obviously, these kind of processes, we're thinking many years, not 1 year, so,
Right.
yeah.
And this could also stand as inspiration for Chris
Mm-hmm. Oh, well.
at Chase Creek.
Absolutely. If you think about it, you find yourself in a situation where if you and your neighbors are aware that things are getting worse, we can support you in a project. We can provide scientists that can consult with you, we can bring in some of the testing opportunities, so.
Chase Creek only has half the population at the most around it. Half of it's Sylvester Manor, the other half is populated on the west side, so.
No, I'm talking about the creek down by First Bridge.
The thicker sides.
Shelter Island Heights.
Right,
Yeah.
right, the heights.
Chase Creek.
Chase Creek,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, right.
Not over by.
Yeah, we keep adding as people become alert to their own estuarine bodies. And look, we need every bit of estuary that we can. It's part of our softening up in relation to tidal impacts on us, and it's part of our decontamination of the water that we're allowing to flow out of Shelter Island. So keeping these what I call ecosystem services going is a critical task, and it's a task that there's a lot of citizenry can have a big impact on. Okay, so any other comments needed about Menantic? Linda, did you want to, you're good? Okay, we're good.
So will we come back to you then at your next meeting and give an update, or what would you like, how would you like to proceed on this?
Well, let's have Joe and me coordinate with the two of you, and we can figure out how frequently. Clearly, what we want is the data being regularly,
Okay.
booked, and not in your hands, but in the town's hands, so that the town can be looking at it as big picture, part of a big picture.
Okay, and I guess we could talk about the format of it. I mean, David's been obviously putting it into Excel, which is something we can easily work with and see, but the raw data is in HoboWare.
Right.
Which is the manufacturer's software, and if the town would like that, and would purchase a $99 subscription to it, they could get the raw data as well.
Okay.
So that's
Well, let's have a
consideration.
discussion. Yeah, with Joe.
No, that was an excellent report.
Yeah, really.
Something to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah, he's been great.
Thank you, David.
I get the star, I go, what? Anyway.
Okay, so the next item, I think is very, very quick. We're just a little frustrated. The drug disposal posters that Lisa's son worked on.
Yeah, we have, I took a poster with regards to drug disposal to the highway department, and it was 3 months ago, and we have since emailed a couple of times. I went and visited there a couple of times saying how hard is this to do. So I'm gonna just ask the town's permission to go get the poster and put it up myself. It means my going on the property with a piece of plywood and just screwing it in. Can I do that?
At night. They're closed. They're closed at night, so.
I'm giving you permission, but I don't think I don't have the,
The authority?
no, but go ahead.
It's just,
It's too frustrating.
it's very frustrating and it's unnecessary.
It is.
So let's just, I'm just gonna do it. And I guess what I'm saying is, I will do it, my husband and I, and if I get in trouble, I'm just gonna say, they said I could.
We discussed it, and certainly.
We talked about it.
It's forget about what they said. It's been recorded.
It's on the recording, Jeff.
Yeah, that little red button.
You what? We'll split your veil.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so.
But I just do
Yeah, go
want
ahead,
to
go
make
ahead.
mention that I think it sort of points to another issue, which is the department, it's not, and this is not an issue, necessarily, I'm just saying that the departments work with one another and cooperate with one another. I think that's very important. If the town, one committee on the town is trying to work toward a specific goal, that all the committees on the town work to that goal. So, and I'm not saying that there is any other issues, but putting it out there that it's something we need to continue to work on.
Yeah, it's a process question in a lot of ways too. Like, we do want to reach up to our board and say, you know, help us coordinate sometimes when it's not really happening, so. All right. So Lisa had also raised that we should really be revisiting the issue of a time frame for modifying our irrigation laws. Definitely. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Jerry spoke about sunsetting the laws. So perhaps having a time, like when? When do we, is there a specific 6-month, 3-month, yearly timeframe that we can say we want to accomplish this in this timeframe? Because we've been talking about it a long time.
Did you guys send us your recommendations?
I don't know that we were asked for it, but we will.
Yeah, that's.
We'll do that.
Well, we just set up a subcommittee of the town board, so there's 2 board members working with building department and a lawyer to.
Yeah, we should pull somebody from this committee.
Yeah, so we have a subcommittee that we just set up to tackle this specific task. So if someone from WIC would like to volunteer to be on it.
Lisa's raising her hand right away.
Because I'm the one who brought it up, so I would be happy to.
It's called the irrigation
It's
subcommittee.
the irrigation subcommittee of the town board, so be on that.
Right.
Okay, let me know what I need to do, because I think it's important. You know, we keep talking about it.
We'll reach out for when they schedule the meeting.
Okay.
I would still think that the discussion about our recommendations is a correct one to be having. Yeah, I have a hand up online. I can't see the name.
Sean Davey, can you hear me?
Sean. Yes, thank you. Yes, we see you.
Only when you're open to a comment. You're ready?
No. You raised your hand and you obviously have a comment specifically related to this.
Thank you. So I'll be brief. Been on Shelter Island for about 25 years, live in Silver Beach. I keep hearing about this discussion on irrigation, and it seems very specific to sunsetting, which is great. And I can't say that when I read the irrigation laws, I completely understand them, and it could be me. But fundamentally, and I've said this in the past, I believe that it is such low-hanging fruit of people that are illegally irrigating their properties, and the town is doing nothing. There's no enforcement. There's nothing done. I think this is an opportunity for the WAC to put forward recommendations for something that is much more aggressive. You have to get a permit to put in any drip line. You have to close out your permit or you'll be fined. And you start actually having these people pull up these lines. The lines are in there and they're only taken out if you have an inspector coming to your property for something of a C of O. And so I walk my dog regularly all across the island, and I can tell you there are drip lines everywhere. And that does not, you can't argue against that with, we don't want hardened, soil, and we're going to focus on education. Every community that is water constrained focuses both on education and regulation and strict enforcement. And we're sitting on our hands. And if we don't start to address the consumption part of this equation, we're really just kind of going in circles. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Sean. Does anybody want to comment on what Sean was just saying?
Well, I mean, I completely agree. I know that the West Neck Water District, when we were a district, and we had our own rules and regulations, which we still do, they're on the books. We didn't allow anything but handheld irrigation. And it took neighbors to enforce it by vis-a-vis talking to other neighbors, which is kind of a tough thing to do community-wide, but it was very effective.
I actually think that there's an insight there, which is that, enforcement has always been our problem.
Yes.
And communities have the greatest interest in the enforcement. The communities themselves. So while I don't want to create a bunch of vigilantes, I kind of do feel that there should be some process for deputizing, allowing people to go to their neighbors and say, here's the regulations, here's a sheet with here's what the town says the regulations are. And, we stay in touch with the town about what we're doing here. And could you please pull up your drip hoses? Or, it's really not okay.
Yeah, the issue really, Sean, I agree with you on that, because basically the privet hedges that have gone on in Silver Beach area amazingly over the last couple of years. And those drip hoses remain. I mean, they're there, you can walk by them for years and years afterwards. Whether or not they're on, I don't know, but the hosing is still there.
Even if some of them are on occasionally, but I think we have flower gardens and vegetable gardens and all these things that are lovely and we want to be part of kind of our natural environment. But making people pull the hose out and water it by hand or a sprinkler is going to make them think a lot harder about when they do it versus just turning on a spigot. And, the town does have the ability, if they believe there is a violation, to go onto the property. And I'll just reiterate again, I walk my dog everywhere. I can see 60% of the houses that I walk by have hoses in the Heights, in Silver Beach, in every area where I walk my dog. And so it's not hard for someone to go around in a car for enforcement and put a notice on someone's door and say, you got a problem.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
What are the guidelines? Like I have drip lines that were installed 15 years ago that are just laying there.
Right.
So is there a guideline? Are they supposed to be taken out after? I understood new plantings can be watered for 1 year. That's what I understand is what the question is.
That is part of it.
But am I required as a homeowner to take out drip lines?
Yes.
Well, I think you get into the legality of this, and I will say that because at West Neck Water District, we did ask a homeowner to remove their drip line. And we were told, I don't know if the logic and the legality of this, but we were told the drip line existed when I bought the house. It's not my responsibility. Oh. And then also, there are legal issues with, and that is something I think that the town needs to iron out and sort of put down and codify in this, with this new subcommittees. But what can you do, what you can't, what you can't do. And I would argue that there are very efficient drip systems. So to just say none is probably not realistic because people do have to plant trees and they do have to grow. So, there could be codifying as regards to what type of system is efficient. Do you just throw out everything? These are all questions, and what is legal to do and what is not legal to do.
Yeah, that does speak to, what we're talking about really is pumped irrigation.
Is what?
Yeah.
Pumped irrigation.
As opposed to having a cistern.
As opposed to having a cistern, correct. Because irrigation is a good thing. It puts water in the ground. It's the pumping that's the bad part.
I mean, the groundwater sourced water is the problem.
Groundwater sourced irrigation, and especially summer pumping, because we've seen the patterns, right? So again, as we're working with the irrigation subcommittee,
It's a lot of questions.
smarter,
Right.
don't shut every valve possible because
Well,
you
near
can
shore is
have
the worst.
unintended consequences. So, sorry, Stella, was that your hand that was up?
Yes, please.
Yes, and so Stella, please.
Thanks so much. I agree with Sean that I think that the town needs to take a little bit more of a enforcement position. Having the neighbor do it, I think the last 3 minutes of this conversation where, you don't know if it was grandfathered, if it was there before the owner bought it, we don't know if it's operational, to really rely on the next door neighbor to know if it's right or wrong. It doesn't sit well. I mean, we in the Heights have at least the ability to see who's using water because we check the readings on the meters. So we kind of know where we've got people who are irrigating a lot. But unless you've got enforcement, and the enforcement that we have is if you abuse the water, we can turn off your water. There should be, I think, something in the middle. And if we ever go the way of not allowing off-island water, then the cisterns aren't really going to be of much help either. So I think we need to look beyond that, the off-island water, and see what impact that would have on any changes to the irrigation laws.
Stella, your comments very much appreciated, and the issue of the degree of enforcement that the town is capable of, I think, is very much an open discussion here, and let's keep that open. I do just want to add to that last comment that one alternative to off-island water is non-summer water or water from a central area of the island moved to a more sensitive area of the island, to cisterns in a more sensitive area. So off-island water is not the only way in which we can make use of cisterns. That said, the rest of your point is completely, BJ.
Peter, rather than having neighbor confront neighbor, there is a complaint form in the building department's website. You can fill out and say, maybe not that it's just there, but if you see it being used or abused, because.
So the one thing is that people have to have confidence that once a complaint goes to the building department, that it might go someplace beyond that.
Oh, yeah, we do have an enforcement officer now, albeit it's part-time, but that's sort of.
Try to create a mechanism.
Yeah.
And I think another part of Stella's comments, which I think it makes a lot of sense, that if in fact irrigation systems are permitted, they should have a meter. That should be like a prerequisite. If somebody's going to put in any kind of irrigation, it should be metered. I personally would hope that we don't do any irrigation, but that may not be realistic.
Just require a permit then if you're going to allow it. So nothing escapes permitting process, so you know who's doing what. And if they put it in temporarily for a new tree, they got to prove to you that they take it out. It's pretty simple.
Obviously, the most obvious abuse is when it's raining out and somebody's sprinkler's going.
Yeah.
We all see that. So that should be an easy report to an enforcement officer. Just say,
could I
please
share
check.
an anecdote with you all regarding this very topic?
Sure, Doug.
We had a situation in Silver Beach where we had a new homeowner that was using 2 sprinklers to water their lawn, or at least their gardener was doing it in the middle of the day. And several of the neighbors noticed it and complained to the Silver Beach Association. Rather than confront the neighbor, we simply checked in with the building department. They sent an inspector around to take a look at it. They had a chat with the homeowner. The homeowner had no idea that using 2 sprinklers at the same time in the middle of the day was against the law. And he immediately complied with the request from the building inspector. So to several points that have been made, there are people who will enforce the code, but they have to be engaged directly.
So it almost sounds, your comment speaks directly to what BJ is saying, and it almost sounds like that teaching this process to our community groups of working with the building department and then working with and is really, so it becomes up to us to make a very, very simple presentation out of here's what you do for this particular problem and bring that to community groups so that they're equipped with what what we're seeming to arm ourselves with here.
And can I make?
You also have to have the will.
I'd like to make a public announcement to everybody who's watching that Meg and BJ will be discussing the comp plan as regards irrigation at the library on August 31st at 5 PM.
As regards water.
Water.
Right.
Irrigation is a part of this
It is
concept.
part of it, yeah.
So please encourage your associations and your neighbors to come and listen to what the comp plan, and give feedback to the town with what direction we can take.
And this is an agenda item beyond the one we're on, but our group, the WAC, as many of us who can participate at the library on that day, if you can, I think that's important to be available. Yeah, Alice,
What time is it?
it's at 5 PM on the 31st, Thursdays. We've done all of our, and we'll kind of try to keep to a habit of Thursdays at 5 for WAC, meet the public, listen to the community.
Could I just to clarify, timeframe was mentioned.
Yeah.
Do you guys have in your mind, like, this is going to be a 6-month project, or is it like, not established yet?
Sunsetting
Oh, I don't
committee.
think the subcommittee is met yet.
No, I just sent an
It
email.
what?
I just sent an email to Stephen to double check who was doing the coordination, but it shouldn't be that long.
So the
Because we
working
have-
group is just getting going.
Yeah.
That's gonna
Yeah.
pull in Lisa, town board member, Joe Venora.
So, and it won't take that long, or it would, 6 months? Is it done in 6 months, or it's still?
It'll be done before 6 months.
Before 6 months, okay, that answers my question.
I am actually September, October, November, December, 4 months is my time.
I know, next year to give out.
Everybody on that subcommittee will still be here.
Yeah.
Right, so that means that it becomes a report back to us, Greg.
Yeah.
Right. So we are going to keep our eye on that timeline.
Yeah.
And also help the timeline if it has to continue across a transition in boards, it's fine.
The goal is before year's end.
Yeah.
Before you have.
I think Greg is trying to get an answer to number 7.
Right.
Well, that was what we were just talking about.
No, I know that, yes, but you were saying, okay, what is the answer to this?
Yes. We now, by year's end.
Right.
Well, the answer to this is that we're going to report back on the answer to this. Okay, so Lisa also had raised that we should be discussing a plan for fertilizer education. I would think fertilizer and also pesticide use.
Well, pesticides they're regulated differently than fertilizers are. They could be part of the conversation, absolutely, with regards to education, yes. But licensure and regulation it's got its own little category. So, we did a lot of talking about this over the winter, and kind of lost the opportunity and the window of time to set this up. So my thought is in trying to get this set up so that next season we can be ready to go with regards to educating arborists, landscapers here on the island and those that come from off island, looking very closely at what licenses they have. They have to have a license from the county that needs to be displayed on their vehicle. But I think predominantly what we need to do is yet another educational piece, inform homeowners about fertilizers. And do they know what's being applied to their property? Are they trusting the applicator? And have that homeowner responsibility, because you call up somebody, you say, please spray for ticks. Well, do you know what that is? Do you know what your options are? Do you know how much has been applied to your property? How many pounds of fertilizer you've put on your property? Because this is important. Newsday did a study a couple of months ago in the spring, whereby we found out that Suffolk County, I think it was 6 million, I might be off by a 0, pounds of fertilizer have been applied to this county, which far outweighs any other county in New York. It's a little scary. We are, of course, an agricultural county, but a lot of this is, as we drive further south, it's homeowners and green lawns and landscaping. So I just think we need to really get serious about how we want to proceed. And
But your thought is about, in this particular case, your thought is about an educational program.
Educational program. We did raise the issue to the town about creating a fertilizer district. I think it's something that Stephen Kiley has to be in on that conversation. Because the fertilizer district that the model that I was looking at is from Massachusetts, which is very different laws than New York does. So there's that whole mechanics of that. Is it the will of the town to create a fertilizer district? You know, that's something that has to be answered, I think, before we.
Yeah, we'd have to look into what it would entail and how enforcement would work. I mean, enforcement's always our biggest problem.
Always.
So we'd have to look and see if it's actually feasible.
Well,
See what the
what
legality is.
would you like? Because we have the model from Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, and we have everything that they did. The suggested laws for codifying it, and then the public meeting and what they, I mean,
Right.
do you need something more than that as a template?
No, you can
'Cause-
send us that, that's a good starting point.
Oh, get it up and,
Yeah.
well, I know, there's so many emails buried in my account, I don't even know where it is, but I will find it for you.
Yeah, no, that's a good starting point.
And you were going to say, yes.
Did you,
Do you want to come up and?
if I'm not mistaken, there's only two, aside from off-island applicators, there's only two applicators that are licensed on Shelter Island. Did you bring them into your discussion at all?
Yeah, Liberty.
Or can you bring them into?
We would like to.
Fertilizers or pesticides?
Fertilizers.
Fertilizers, only two.
There's only two,
Liberty and
Liberty, and go ahead. Do you know the names?
I do, I don't know if I should put it out here.
okay.
No, it's not an issue.
It's Liberty and it's Peconic, which is red.
Okay.
Well,
Now, I know.
Tom, that would be part of the education.
I've spoken to one of them about it, who's, I think, an invaluable source for you to bring upon programs. I'm done. I'm finished.
No, but we very much agree with you. There was some point in time when somebody said there are people on island who run water supply companies like Stella and Lisa, and yeah, we want to bring them in.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know both of those guys, so I think that's a very doable thing for us to plan on.
So in my estimation, Tom, what needs to be done is the town has to say, yes, we have the will to proceed with this. Let's see legally what we have to do. Who do we have to talk to? And then start the conversations with the contractors, and then start the education with the homeowner. But it's a very lengthy process, like everything. So the timeframe, from, I think it's November to April, they're not allowed countywide to be applied. Starting April, that's when fertilizers are permitted in Suffolk County to be applied. So we want to be ready.
Sometime during this fall to spring period, we want to get ourselves a program going.
Right. So at some point, it would be invaluable to bring them in. But I think the first step is the town want to take this on.
So do you visualize an educational program like at the library you've been doing?
Well, again, the model that I've looked at, Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, they had it in a public forum. I don't know where they had it, but it was a day-long educational presentation by somebody from Amherst University, did the presentation to the contractors. And they provided lunch. They made it a fun thing. Also, they found that it was very valuable because contractors were able to speak with one another. So whereas you may only have two that are licensed here on Shelter Island, the fact of the matter is we know contractors there's probably more from off island that come here than on the island, or as many. So you want to invite as many contractors as possible and make it attractive for them to understand what they're doing. because very often, as we know, the people that use these fertilizers and pesticides are the laborers. They don't necessarily know what they're applying and the effects of it on their own health. But again, homeowners need to be brought into this education process as well. So as far as, the format for how to do this, the information is out there. It's just putting it together and moving ahead step by step.
It's the will of the town, basically, to
It's the will of the town
to
to
be able
say,
to
yes, we
stand behind
support
us.
this
But,
effort.
so that has to be coalesced in some fashion, the will of the town. And that it does seem to start with this educational process and some sort of a process that's more kumbaya than the typical process, a little bit more of, yeah, we all kind of want to do something here. Now, the WQI has recommended far more drastic restrictions in fertilizer use. We have not, I believe, the WQI recommended to the town board, no? 6 months, a year ago, to restrict fertilizer and pesticide uses much more completely.
Where could we find this out?
I don't.
We're all looking at you,
I
Greg.
don't recall that.
I don't recall any of this.
That's occurred.
That's why I'm kind of scratching my head.
Okay.
When it happened.
All right, we'll have to go back on that.
Conversation, but I don't think that
You don't
was,
think that
nothing was moved up to the town board. And I don't, because we're bankers.
Well, all right. The question is, should we be making any recommendation about
Green options.
further time?
Green options.
Green options did?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, the question is, talking to other committees about, is our will that there be, we are trying to pull for nitrogen out of the septic systems, why are we adding it to the ground? Unless very carefully, so in very restricted ways.
I'll give Tim
Yeah.
a shout out about that.
It could be CAC. I'm not a liaison to either one of them, but it just.
Both of them have been working or talking about an educational program. Green Options and CAC are both attempting to address fertilizers, so.
Yeah, we have to begin to talk with our.
That's right, we have to, again, that's a whole, that's a committee
You have
thing.
like a cross-committee chat up.
Yeah.
At the Green Expo.
I'll talk to Tim Patel and see
Yeah.
what they're
Because we
doing.
have a subcommittee with someone from CAC, someone from Green Options, and someone from you guys, and then have a little group that gets together, and then you go back to your groups.
Your own irrigation
and come
committee.
back together.
All right, well, that actually it's 3:25, and that also brings us very nicely to Green Expo. WAC tabling and materials. So Green Expo, I would, I had thought as the Green Expo had changed, one of the good things about it would be even a better venue and opportunity for the various committees to be talking amongst ourselves when we're at the Green Expo.
Yeah.
So I just encourage, I don't know if you guys or any of you are able to join us, to be there at the table for Saturday, the 26th from 11 to 3. I certainly will be there.
I'll
You'll
be
be
there.
there. Anybody else you'll be there, you're gonna come. So, yeah, bring a hat, bring some water,
I'm bringing my poster.
bring your poster, absolutely, bring your poster. Yep, let's get that up at the table. In fact, and that was one of the items here was materials, the old handouts that we've given out are grown old.
Very.
So we may want to be, I think that what's more important than handouts and materials, though good handouts and materials are very important and good, but being there to talk to people, to engage people
Right.
is really what I found is doing the most. So any of us who can be there. And the library on the 31st, to be at the library on the 31st. Okay, so just unless there's more on Green Expo or
I
library?
was just gonna ask how the feedback from the
Last library.
circular that went around the town, the little cards.
Oh, well, yes, old business, brief report back on ongoing progress, yeah.
All right, she's got something. I'm excited.
Yes.
So like we had 167 people respond, so, Oldman.
500 cents.
Yeah, so we got like a 20% return.
Yeah, so let's start with 167 people responding.
Out of 432 we sent out,
Right.
so almost 40%. So Open Water Testing has already been reaching out to people, and they've already done some water testing. It's a long list, so if they haven't called you yet, that's okay. They will be getting in touch with you. They're slowly working their way down the spreadsheet. So, we have run into one glitch that both, Greg and myself totally spaced on. Greg Nissen from Goldman. So we're testing for nitrates, nitrites, ammonia, bacteria, and detergents. So with the bacteria testing, there's protocol. So let's say you do your water sample and it comes back positive for bacteria. So part of that protocol is that you then have to go back and do a confirmation sample to make sure it didn't get contaminated at the first time you took it and it was actually in the water supply, not, some accidental contamination by the sampler. So that's one thing we're gonna have to take into account is if someone does get a positive bacteria test, we're gonna have to include that confirmation test in our protocols. So far they've tested, I wanna say 10 or 20 people and they've had 2 positive bacteria results. So we're gonna have to do confirmations for those.
Okay.
So we'll have to add that into.
Are we okay budget-wise and everything with that, or it's all?
Yeah, we'll ask WQI to cover it. Greg's gonna do it at a good rate for us, because we both totally spaced on it. But that's standard protocol
Thank you,
for the
Greg.
water testing. And if we're doing the water testing, we need to do it correctly. So yeah.
This isn't just about data, it's also about people's health.
The data's about people's health.
I don't know, data.
So he said for the bacteria confirmation, it's about $50. So we'll see how many tests we come up with that need it. At this point, I can't tell you. So far, it's 2.
Well,
But I'll
one
keep track of that.
out of 5 is pretty high still. I mean, that
Yeah, yeah.
if it's in fact a true
Bacteria.
test, then that's,
So it's something to note. So
Good
we'll see how
information.
it all, maybe we just got lucky with the first few samples and we won't have that many after this, but we'll see.
Right.
So it's something I'm keeping track of.
great.
Right. And then obviously they're doing the data anonymization for us,
Yep.
but I'm wondering in terms of then formatting that onto something that gives us a visualization of.
So
You haven't seen Meg's new.
I've already
Yeah.
created the spreadsheets for them. So I did all of that. They have the master spreadsheet for contacting everyone, and then I broke down, have you seen the triangle with all the colors? We already saw this, okay. So then I have a spreadsheet that correlates with the triangle, so you have a color chunk for one, and then it has all the person's information, they put all the contact information. Before they send that to us, they delete all the identifying markers from that. So you just have chunk 1 with data sets, no contact information, no identifiers for the property.
Got it.
Chunk 2, just data. Chunk 3, just data, but no property information.
But how did she determine the chunks?
Well, they saw the rainbow triangle, so that's how it was all broken down. So it's done by
Watersheds.
watersheds, it's done by directional flow in neighborhoods.
Terrific. No,
So-
watershed orientation is exactly what we need.
Yep.
Yep.
So it's a funky looking picture, but it's gonna be far more valuable than if I just did a pure grid.
Yeah.
Because if you have people on either side of a watershed, you may get very different results depending on the directional flow.
And as you understand it better, then you're also seeing a little bit of a prediction of what's going to happen downstream.
Correct. So they're hoping to be done with all the sampling by the end of August. So hopefully by mid-September, we should have all the data.
Wonderful.
Fingers crossed.
Great, that's
And it's
terrific.
pretty evenly dispersed, it's
Yeah.
not final.
Yeah,
For those who get the high bacteria reading, then if a shock is required, who pays for that?
That would be the homeowner's responsibility, because you can do it yourself.
Right.
And so what Greg will do is provide paperwork on how to do it, on what you need, how much it approximately costs to do, contact people if you need someone to help you, but also just the whole process on how to do it yourself. So there'll be educational components if that is something that comes up.
great. All right, we don't need extensive report backs on everything. I know we've just gotten through a grant season. We have a bunch of grants in. West Neck's got their grant in. Fresh Pond has a grant in. So just to be clear. There was one item of new business, which was that we're all need to be reviewing the ethics code.
Right.
And I don't know if you've all had, I have, go find Barbara right after the meeting, but we have to sign.
He's right across the street.
Yep.
Oh, okay, thanks, Catherine.
All right. Are there questions about the ethics codes or?
Has it been modified? from the one from a year or two ago?
Oh, yeah, we passed a new ethics.
It's in there.
We passed a new ethics code.
Okay, so it is a change, it's not.
Yeah, and they have both an the legalese version and an
A plain English guide.
As well. And
Like that.
You should see it in incoming from Catherine.
Well, it's in your pack, so you can read it.
Okay.
New business?
All right, yeah, new business that you want to have.
I don't know if now's the timing or not, but we have suggested that we have some professional help.
Right.
Everyone has discussed professional help.
Right.
Is there a way to begin the funding process, basically, through the town to say, can we allocate something in a plan so that we can move on and say, we've done something this year with regards to
Hydrology
going
expertise
with expertise
and data
in some
modeling
fashion.
expertise, yeah.
Yeah.
The
The funding cycle is
I
probably
believe-
coming up again, probably.
It's in our fund, it's in, well, I mean, we'll see what the supervisor wants to do, but I did ask for that in our budget
Okay.
to the tune of $50,000. So I don't know what we'll have to work with, but
Okay.
as an initial thing, that seems like it would,
Great.
you know,
It
you
is
could
a
begin a
start.
process of reviewing candidates and people who might help us, right?
Okay, good start.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Other comments from the audience, public, members, new business items? Okay, so maybe only 5 minutes late. Motion to adjourn? All right.
Second.
And all in favor? We are adjourned, folks. Have a nice afternoon.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.